trails and the maps that have been used on the Renolda organization's website, the houses, the gardens. So the Renolda estate consists of the house, the gardens, and the village. And it was built and owned by R.J. Reynolds and his wife Catherine Smith, and it became public domain in 1965. So that means the village and the estate were opened up as a museum for art and education, and the natural areas were conserved to try and also promote education for the public. So the public domain is split into two domains: the Renolda House, which is like a museum, and the Renolda Gardens, which is like a natural state, or with the prairie and that kind of thing. So the gardens contain a greater gardens area that they call it, which consists of a bunch of natural areas, the trails, like Catherine Falls under there. And so the trails and natural areas serve both as a recreational and educational purpose for the public. There'll be people running, and they'll take classes out there in the summer. They use them to show like for kids. And so the problem is that their current map is not that great. It's kind of visually, it's kind of hard to really figure out which trails are different than one another. But they basically have the Woodland Trail and the Perimeter Trail. This is a map that's on the website. When you actually go walk on the trails, they have their own map. It says like you are here. It just shows the Perimeter Trail and the Woodland Trail. And so it really doesn't have things like benches, birdhouses, things of really just key interest for people who use these things. You see a lot of like other people walking on these things, so they know like what benches are. They list themselves as like a bird watching group, so they need to know where like the birdhouses are and where our key interest points are. So the goal is to digitize a more accurate map of the natural area of the gardens, which had the desired elements. So we needed to have an updated trails, which also were digitized for the people. Mark locations of birdhouses, mark locations of benches, and also a digitized area of the natural prairie.
Okay, so in order to do this, we went out to the trails and we used this GPS that I have over there, and we took a mark every time the trails deviated off of a straight path, so you could tell where you could get a more accurate representation of the trail instead of what they had, which tended to be just straight. We also took marks at junctions, which they had one junction mark between the Perimeter Trail and the Woodland Trail, but there's actually three. And then we used all the points that we marked along the prairie and the trails and uploaded them onto ArcMap. And then we took a Google Earth Pro image and clipped it and put all of our points onto that image. And this is what we got. As Andrew mentioned, they are supposed to be a bird watching area, but if you notice, all of the birdhouses are kind of centralized along the prairie area and this open field, and there's only like 2 birdhouses along the trails. And another point that Andrew mentioned is there's a sign right here that tells you the actual distance of the trails, but it doesn't give you, it just gives you the total distance of the Woodland Trail, which is in yellow, and then the Perimeter Trail, which is in green, and it's kind of not helpful in that it's here, which is not near where the beginning of the trail is. So what we found were there were 19 birdhouses and 6 benches. The benches were three were before the trail started, and then there were some just benches spread out along the trail. And if you're elderly, I think we'd suggest the Woodland Trail because there's more benches.
There's a map kind of close up on more detail. I don't know if they wanted. We also asked them what branches they wanted to highlight, and I don't know if it was a mixture of them wanting certain ones and us wanting to map all of them. So we chose to map all of them, even though on the map they gave us they only had 6 highlighted. Those 6 are included, but we also tried to add all the rest of them to kind of keep track of them.
So we don't know if that was like, they don't know how many birdhouses they have, or so we just want to make sure that they got good representation of all the birdhouses and where they're located. So just to reiterate, our goal was to basically make a more efficient map and to update the nature trails and sort of the garden areas, as well as include any kind of key features of interest that leads to the public or the mobile house. Our map displays a more accurate trail representation. It displays benches and birdhouse locations, as well as the area of the prairie, all imposed over a high-resolution image. And in addition to the accuracy and added features, we've also created a map that's we think is easier to view for the viewer and they can better orientate themselves for where they are. For the GPS. Got it, if possible.
Great. So did you guys figure out if you could like add that map to their website? Did you look into making it, embedding it so that it would be, would you embed it as something that was static, or did you look at how you can embed something that you could zoom in and out of?
I think we would like it something that we could zoom in and out of. We haven't showed it to the people yet. We were going to show it to them first and see if they liked it or any other changes since it is on their website. So we're going to wait to hear back from them, and then we'll tweak it accordingly. So, but I think overall it's kind of what they wanted, at least from our understanding.
Mm-hmm. And did you get the area of the prairie? Did you guys calculate that?
We haven't calculated it, but we have enough concept that we should be able to do that calculation.
What kind of birdhouses were there?
Being like the smaller birdhouses about.
I mean, you know what kind of birds are for?
They have a list of all the bird species that are named in this area.
And are they all the same type of birdhouse?
Yes, except for the one that's like towards the cap. It's much larger.
Was that the one in the open area or in the wooded area? Because I know those two.
It's more of a wooded area.
Okay. Thank you.
I think I've heard nuthatches and bluebirds.
Yeah, bluebirds make sense.
They have modifications on them, because I guess nuthatches are a focus species right now.
Really? Okay.
I don't know if they're declining or something. So they put like a little modification on the bluebird house so that only the nuthatches can get in.
Okay.
Good. Well, did you guys have fun?
Yeah, especially in the rain. Yeah.
What was your biggest challenge with the project?
Keeping track of all the points. I guess how we named them. Thankfully, the GPS kept track and tell us if it was a repeat of one. But
We mismarked the birdhouses. We have 19 with 22 marks, so we skipped 3
Yeah.
and 5. Another issue we had was when we got the map off of Google Earth Pro, there wasn't any geographic data.
It wasn't projected at all.
yeah, so it's hard to get the two to overlap perfectly.
So we had to look up how to georeference it and to line up with all that.
So you learned some new skills in the process.
Yeah, and I also figured out how to cut the image, which is nice.
Yeah, definitely. Whenever you guys if you ever use a Google map, though, always be sure to cite it, because I'll be sure that you say that it's a Google map.
Yeah.
I don't know if you did.
Yeah, we did have it in our
Okay.
in the map and then also
Map
in
and the
the source language.
Okay. They're big on copyright.
Can't win that lawsuit.
Okay, great. Good job, guys. All right, I'm going to go next.
Okay.
Is it uploaded on Sakai now?
That's the presentation. It was wound up being fairly simple. It was just all the mistakes I made and put them away.
Yeah, that's usually what happens.
So do I do that microphone?
Yeah, you can clip it on to yourself if you're the only one talking, and
Getting a seminar.
they can put this on their Chamber of Commerce website too.
Oh, they're gonna want to do that.
you just say often.
So, I'm from Hendersonville, North Carolina, which is a small town outside of Asheville, city, I guess now. And growing up, I noticed there are a lot of churches. Just an observation, and I wanted to know how many churches there were and what type of churches there were. That's a question I've had for a while. Never really had the desire to really find out until now when I had an excuse to. So I chose Hendersonville, North Carolina. Like I said, grew up in Hendersonville. There's also a lot. Of retirees, and there's also a lot of small family churches. So, just anecdotal evidence. One of my ex-girlfriends, half of her family was the only population that lived on a mountain, and not like Pilot Mountain, like a mountain. So you have like 100 houses, and they're all the same last name. And they all went to one of two churches, whose only what do you call people who go to churches? Flock. Let's go with flock. Came from these two families. Additionally, so that building down the lower left-hand corner was a student youth center that was built by the First Baptist Church in Henderson County, which is one of the strongest church presences. And that organization. And just to give an example of how strong the church presence is in Henderson County, so it's kind of like a recreational center for youth downtown, except after, I think, 6 p.m., it's mandatory Bible service, or Bible study. And if you don't attend, they kick you out, which is interesting. I got kicked out 2 or 3 times, and I was like, alright, I'll read other books. So yeah, I wanted to know just how many churches were in Henderson County and what branches of what denominations had the strongest presence of right property. I think if I wanted to expand this, which I kind of do, I would find out by population. But that would require a lot of phone calls, I think. Possibly. And that's a pretty picture of Hendersonville in the upper right-hand corner. It's not sad. Those trees are gone. So, how did I do this? And I know it sounds incredibly complicated. Mostly I did 2 things. I found a shapefile for all the buildings in Henderson County, and then I found a shapefile for all the county subdivisions. Crazy, right? So, I mostly got all my information from the Henderson County GIS website. I learned that most townships have, or at least most counties, have their own GIS department, which is incredibly useful. So that was nice. They had a whole list of all the shapefiles I might need. Initially, I tried to geocode it, and I was dead set on doing that. And I realized if you don't have things that line up, it's kind of impossible. So that was a good 4 or 5 hours spent throwing things. But I eventually learned that this shapefile had everything I needed. So I went through it, and I found all of the building types that were listed as a church, and I removed those, and out of a really large number, there were 237 churches. So the population of Henderson County is about 100,000. And not all of these are churches. I think 3 or 4 of them are church properties that also have a cemetery. And a lot of them are owned. So then I had to go through the names and find out which was which. I had to check things against yellow pages to figure out if one. So there's a few churches that don't specifically say what denomination belong to. Their name, they're churches that the properties are owned by boards and advisory boards and things like that, or individuals. And then what was the other thing? Then there's a bunch of other churches that have such a small presence I didn't lump them into one denomination or the other. I'll get to that later. There are 8 subdivisions in Henderson County. Hendersonville is the largest with about 40,000 people in it. The rest of them have about 5,000 except for Edneyville, I think, and Mills River, which had around 10,000 people. But I'll get to that when we get to the map. churches on the top sects. Top sects are Baptist, Episcopal, Presbyterian, Methodist. Out of 236 churches, 132 are Baptist. And then you have 8 Episcopal, 15 Methodist, and something like 5 Presbyterian. And those are the largest numbers in each category. There's 1 Catholic church in Henderson County, and there's also 1 Russian East Orthodox church. But I included Catholic as a category since it's a more accessible reference point for most people. And then, like I said before, I use Yellow Pages to verify addresses and make sure I had the proper number. So population data did not come with each subdivision with the subdivision shapefile, and I had to go to citydata.com and search for that. That was pretty easy. Just Googled that, got the corresponding data, and then everything else was pretty straightforward and what we do in class for every project. So here was the final project. As you can see, yellow dots are Baptist churches. There's a lot of them. And I thought it was interesting that in Green River and Crab Creek, basically everyone except for this one is a Baptist church. I think that red one is kind of like a church tabernacle or something. The Catholic church is right in the middle of Henderson County, and then let's see, there's 2 Pentecostal churches right here, and then Methodist scattered around a little bit, Episcopal scattered around somewhat, and the Russian East Orthodox is right up there. So there's a table on the left that does give the numbers. 74 were listed into other, and I know that's a frustrating category to provide, especially in a map like this. But it just wasn't really practical to list them all. So yeah, and then population. So as you can see, the population breakdowns go from the first 3 are 5,000 to 15,000, and then the middle, Henderson County, 40,000. So you can see the more rural areas are more similar in population. And well, raise your hand if you know where Henderson County is. Great, perfect. So I can set this map. This is Henderson County. Asheville is just above it, and then Raleigh is right over here. And more likely. So as you can see, it's close to Tennessee and South Carolina, and good stuff that happens there. I'm saying good stuff happens there. Any questions?
It's pretty impressive that they have a map of all of the buildings in there.
Well, it wasn't. Yeah, actually, yeah. And then they had tables and stuff.
And even the buildings outside of the, I assume that the central point is more of like the city.
Yeah.
And then the other ones are all quite rural, aren't they? The ones, and those are even included in the.
Yeah. So that actually was really cool. And then even. Well, yeah, I thought that was phenomenal. And there was a bunch of other things they had. I think they even had landlines. And some weirdly specific things. That must be amped.
So what was your biggest challenge with this project?
Biggest challenge was trying to geocode things that I couldn't geocode. And then the other time when I needed the population data, I didn't realize I could just Google it. And so I called the GIS office, and I had an oddly difficult time being specific about what I needed.
The GIS office in
Henderson.
Okay.
So that was just interesting to me. That, I mean, just because I know what I'm talking about doesn't mean they do. And so just the importance of recording where you got your data and where you got shapefiles and what they are was kind of impressed upon me at that moment.
So the population data is census data?
It's basically it's kind of a yellow pages for city statistics.
So what about the churches that take places in like middle schools or someone's basement? They're not like accounted for.
So no, these are no. So things that are like secondary church meeting places are not being accounted unless they are owned by church staff.
Did you say you took out the like church-owned properties that weren't like actively practicing, or are those still included in there? So, like, own, like a rundown house, you know?
Yeah, I don't think many have like a rundown house. There are some that are like fellowship halls or like Crosswalk. I think is probably listed on there.
Or like they'll buy houses where they're like preachers to live in.
Yeah, I don't know how much of that
Welcome to the South, guys.
is there. Yeah. I didn't see much of it because I think in that case they were listed by building type, so I don't think that would have been listed by church. I think that would have been listed under one-story apartment. Or the table I got this one was amazing. It had the type of basement, siding, what kind of heating it had.
It's really surprising. Where do they have the money to fund that kind of data collection?
To be fair, they do weird things to their money, so I'm not wholly surprised.
Yeah.
But
Did you talk to them? You said you spoke to them. Did you tell them you have GIS skills and you're graduating? And
no, I was quite awake when I called them. So yeah, it was, and that'd probably be answer to your question, Ted, is those buildings be listed under apartments or houses.
You said you wanted to do like more work on this data. What's like the next step?
I think figuring out the denomination presence by population, and then if I could get really would be really cool is if I could get like a heat map of that, but
what do you mean a heat map? Of
like pictures in my head. So just even smaller scale than this. So within the jurisdictions, find out where certain densities of people that attend X church are, as opposed to.
Okay, so the distribution of the populations that go to each one of the churches?
Yeah, well, not churches, but denominations.
Denominations.
Yeah.
So you want to represent where do the people who are going to Baptist church live versus people who are going to the Catholic church?
I'm assuming, people in Crab Creek are typically going to the Baptist church since there's no
only
other church.
Baptist churches there.
Weird.
Because you set out when you were first thinking about this project, it was a little bit different in your mind, wasn't it? Was it just the locations?
It was just churches, I think, and then kind of seeing how they were scattered around.
Fascinating. Great. Thanks, Ryan. You guys want to go next? Okay. Is there a single PowerPoint or are there separate PowerPoints?
There is single PowerPoint.
One PowerPoint.
Two different
Okay.
And then we also need to go to the RJS online.
Okay.
And then we also need to show her information from her marketing.
Okay.
We don't have.
No, we're going to show it.
Show it.
What is it?
But it's like not even that impressive.
Unitarian? It's like-
You know what? It's worth it, okay?
I know. I'm like.
It is, but it's not.
Okay.
Okay.
You wanna? Why don't we? Log in our RTS. I don't know if something about that.
We're not even Bible thinking.
The heating system and it's really cold in here in the air.
Yeah, so some of them
Do you want me to show you the
No, I think you like I think you should
I
share
mean,
it.
I don't know.
Do you want us? Why don't we do that last? Okay.
Also, the big thing has got one person.
Okay, and then you can just open your folder and download whichever one has it.
That's the
Better than crying. I do. I think that's better than crying. I think it's a better response.
I mean, once Luke's house goes, the world goes.
I'll go over here because you guys have no hair.
Microphone. Okay, good.
Just sit it. Yeah, it's like there.
I was disgusted.
I really don't.
I want that.
Whole thing over there. Can we do that? Can it hear us? Is it sensitive enough for that, or am I gonna have to be like?
I don't know. Just shout.
I think it's fine.
Yeah, just hold it. It's fine.
Okay. So I'll go to the next slide then. So, this program is a nationwide program that uses volunteers to collect bird data in like species, gender, and location. Right now, the Lights Out North Carolina program involves Winston-Salem, Raleigh, and Charlotte. It asks proprietors to turn their lights off from 11 p.m. to dawn because the lights disorient the birds whenever there's like fog or some kind of cloud coverage that makes the birds fly lower and it makes them fly into the distance. Specifically on their website, the wood thrush has been recognized as a priority bird because its habitat and species number have been increasingly threatened in the eastern United States. And it would be interesting, and for us specifically, to note that the Atlantic Flyway, which is where all the birds fly through, and these buildings are in the way.
So basically we have a whole bunch of data that has been collected for like the past 2 years, and we wanted to figure out like the best way to represent it so that you can see how many birds are dying where and what are like the buildings that are hit the most frequently. And we really wanted to be able to show species distribution, but we'll show you how we tried to do that and how it's just not as accessible as we want it to be. But so we're going to start with.
Okay, so for me, I focused on Winston-Salem, and Winston-Salem had unique data just because they had data from 2011, which was before this Lights Out program occurred, and so my kind of data analysis and mapping focused on a comparison of 2011 data to 2012, 2013, 2014 data, and so for this comparison, I used ArcMap and ArcScene, and so for ArcMap, in order to make the map, I had to condense the raw data into this fall season, which was October 7th to November 6th, which was what they had data from 2011 for. And unfortunately, unlike Orion, there was no shapefile with the buildings provided. And even on the base map, we used the streets base map, as we'll show you later. There was no outlines of buildings to trace, so I used kind of Google Earth to find the points, and then I exported the KML points into ArcMap, then used the image-based layer, saw where those points were over those specific buildings, then just created my own shapefile around it. So I didn't kind of end up using the exported points from Google Earth, besides the fact that I just used them for kind of referencing on the image-based map itself. And so I created 4 new polygon feature classes from that, and then combined it with the condensed Excel data, which was just collisions that birds had yearly with each specific building. And then I was able to use those same layers for ArcScene, and ArcScene allows you to do kind of 3D analysis and represent data that way. And so I was able to extrude the values of bird collisions for each year over the buildings. So as you'll see kind of at the end of the presentation, the number of bird collisions is represented my ARC map, and I was kind of struggling with how to represent the data this way because I'm doing a comparison. I wanted all the data in one location, and so I could kind of chose to do a gradient map and create multiple maps, but because I want to show like the comparison, I want all the data in one place for everyone to see. So although it's kind of cluttered, the data is there and the numbers are there. That's another problem with kind of ARC scene is that I was able to extrude the values and it looks really cool, but you can't actually tell like what the height is. Like, is the height 4 birds? Is it 9 birds? What exactly is it? And so that's kind of why, although this isn't, I'm not the most proud person of this map, I think it allows you to kind of see and compare data across the years without having to do an animation or anything like that. So like this is something we can provide for them as like a representation of the data. One thing to note, however, was that there were 3 buildings which I didn't include. One was One Park Vista, which was represented in like the list of 2011 buildings, but they did not provide a list for buildings afterwards. So there's only this one point from One Park Vista, and then I wasn't able to tell if like 0 hit birds had hit it in subsequent years, just because they didn't record when no birds hit it. They only recorded when birds did hit it, so it was kind of unsure if this building remained as part of the Lights Out program. And then there's also the Pepper Building and the Winston-Salem Foundation, which were not in the original 2011 list, which birds hit. And this is kind of representative of the fact that like there were a lot of buildings that individuals like recorded birds hitting that weren't actually kind of on the route or during kind of like times where they should be monitoring birds. People like in my idea specifically, like one woman like who was specifically very worried about the birds would go out all the time and just kind of record whenever she saw birds hitting buildings. And so this is actually reflected in the data itself, in the fact that some buildings saw increases in the number of birds that collided with them. So for the GMAC building, for example, it went from 5 collisions in 2011 to 9 collisions in 2014. And so I'll discuss reasons why this may have occurred in the limitations at the end of the presentation. But overall, just looking at year 2011 and 2014, comparing the two, a total of 7 buildings out of 13 showed a decrease in total number of bird collisions.
Okay, so I'm going to first explain why we did ARC Online and ArcMap. So the volunteers were able to input into tables that had sections for like species, gender, and age, but the only complete data was from the species portion. So that's why we tried to enhance the interactivity of these maps with like species and pictures and stuff. So and also these birds that they collect are donated to museums for research and education. So it'd be good to show the pictures of these birds not only for like educational purposes, but also to invoke like an emotional awareness of these dead birds. They're really cute birds. They're super cute. So people can click on these little points and see what cute little bird died. Like, okay, I'm gonna turn off my lights now. So that's the point of this.
And also with the wood thrushes who are like really endangered, that's also a way we gave them a specific color and shape of point that we know, so that you can see it when you look at the maps. Both all of our maps, it's the same point across. So you can be like, oh, well, these are the buildings that like these high risk birds keep running into. So that was originally why we went through all the trouble.
Yes, I'm gonna go to that interactive map now, and it's unfortunate that like ARC Online works like ArcMap. It's easier to work with, but it has less tools. It would be good if we could have incorporated the gradient into ARC Online instead of having to do a separate ArcMap map, but we'll see what we try to do. So
The evil empire strikes again.
Just an exclusive group.
But anyway, that's what we have. So we have spring 2014 Raleigh, fall 2014, fall 2013 maps for this, and
then I have spring 2013 and spring 2014 for Charlotte as well.
yeah, and the same point.
Did you guys have to digitize those polygons too, or were you able to use the
We had to
create your own polygons?
Actually, we had a really frustrating occurrence in which we copied that layer so you could use it over and over again for each city because the buildings are in the same place. But after making 3 maps and changing it as we saw fit,
So you would finish the first map, and then you'd start the second one, and you'd be like, okay, let me put a new bird here.
Yeah.
Or like, delete this building, and then you go back to your first one, and the building would be gone from the first one too, and it would be
Yeah.
changing all of your birds. So they're not like separate entities at all, even though you like saved it as a copy, and it has a whole separate name, and there was no way for...
yeah, so we had to redraw them 3 times and go back, and it was very frustrating. But anyway, so our
Okay, so,
oh yeah.
oh.
No, it's okay. I'll just follow
Okay. So first we had to go through, and it was just raw data that we were given. And the way the data is collected is volunteers go out and they record whatever they know about the bird that they find, which is kind of a problem that we'll talk about later. But so we modified it. We went through and cleared some of the columns that were really incomplete, had not applicable for all of the entries, so that wasn't really relevant data. And we compiled it into one map or one spreadsheet where you can see the building that it ran into, the type of bird, and the date, which ended up not being useful. And then created a feature class on top of the Esri Streets base map. Drew the polygons, and then joined the new layer with the Excel table that we created. So one thing that I had trouble with is I tried to like cheat the system and just use the numbers from when you drew the polygon. It gives it an FIT number, like 0 through 14. Problem is when you delete a building, it goes through and reorganizes all your numbers. So going from one year, like one season to the next, I would have completely new numbers, and so I'd have to rematch up all the building names with the building numbers, and so that was frustrating. But then we joined the layers, and then we selected a gradient so that you could see the number of birds that died in each building, so that they would line up. So in our ArcMap map final product, it's just the sheer like volume of birds that collided with this building in this season, which you can see.
So this is my Raleigh Spring 2014 map. It has no comparison because I don't have Spring 2013. I'll show a comparison between Fall 2013 and Fall 2014. But in total, I had 11 buildings. Some birds did not hit certain buildings, so I excluded them. And in my legend, you can see like a specific number. So since so few, I guess, or like I don't know. Well, so each color corresponds to a specific number. It's not a range. And the pros to like looking at it this way is you can see the density by color, but it would be better if we had like GPS points of where exactly the volunteer collected the bird, because then you can see on what side of the building they found it and from what direction the birds are flying. But we can do that. So that's my spring, and then I have fall here. And it's mostly a random distribution as far as I can see. Only two buildings had a really significant change between the 2 seasons. So BB&T, 8 birds died there, and then in fall 2014, only 2 birds died there. And then for the Duke Energy Center, 3 birds died there, and then in fall 2014, 10 birds died there. But the other buildings just fall in the range of like 1 to 4, so it's not.
And this is all during the Lights Out program, so neither one of us had data from before, so we can see that like you turning your lights actually helping. But we were hoping to see, which we kind of saw, I guess, pretty consistent numbers, or pretty consistent like localization of the bird death. Which, yeah, you'll see on my map in a second, because I had more buildings, because Charlotte is just a bigger city, more skyscrapers, more buildings to get in the way.
One thing to note is that 35 birds died in total in fall 2013, and then 32 died in fall 2014. So anyway, this is Charlotte. Oh my god, that's fun.
Okay, so this is comparing spring 2013 and spring 2014 in Charlotte, and you can see that there are a little bit of differences in the buildings that were reported at. So if you look right here, these are a condo complex that was put up or like completed between the two seasons, and it's the Charlotte data recorders, bless their hearts, just record birds wherever they find them, whenever they find them. It's not a consistent distribution of buildings. There was one who was like, I found a bird in the middle of the street. And I was like, I'm not including that. And like she was saying, it would be really, some people would be really diligent about it. They'd be like, I found this bird in this place. It was on the south side of the building, or like on the South College Street side, or whatever. But for the most part, we didn't have access to that data. So really, the only trend that I can pick up in here is you can see like the numbers are different. So there were more. What's this called? Legend. The legend is different. So, but you can see the darker the colors represent like the higher density, and you can see pretty much centrally in the city, as well as like over here, even though there are more buildings. You can see that that's pretty consistently a place where birds are colliding with the buildings. So I think it would be really interesting to see, maybe go back and look at maybe why. We were talking about maybe looking at the heights of these buildings to see if they're extra high or extra big, and that's why birds can't seem to avoid them. But for the most part, just like she said, there were 47 birds, 48 birds, but I only included 46 points from each because there were 2 unknown buildings, which is not helpful. So yeah, so that's more or less what we found. It's also important to note, spring migration birds are flying north, and so you can kind of see how the buildings would be getting in the way more from here than they would be during like fall where you're going south. So it'd be interesting for like further studies to look at the difference between spring and fall and see if they're different.
Which side of the building are like dying?
That's also super interesting.
Yeah,
and volunteers, some GPS. Is there a way? Okay, you know how you can like drop a pin on your iPhone? Is there a way to like drop a pin on like a program that shares it with? Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
I couldn't make an app of that, but someone
Somebody
could.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can share that.
That would be
you
very
can,
interesting.
you can do it at Google Earth.
Really? Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, so we've discussed a lot of the limitations so far already, but so there was a huge number of building inconsistencies. Like I said, that there was cool buildings that like I left out just because they weren't the same between like the comparable seasons, and for you guys, just even between years, like certain buildings were added or dropped, or not necessarily dropped. Maybe they were kept on a list of buildings that they were supposed to monitor, but because no birds ended up getting harmed there, like there was no way of us necessarily knowing if those were still being visited. And there's a huge possibility in this for surveyor error, just because we're relying on volunteers who have limited knowledge just on like species. For example, you guys would mention to me all the time how there was like a pair of individuals who were very sure that they would see a certain species.
It was always other birds. There was this 2 ladies, and they were, every time they went out, didn't matter where they went, they found another bird. So I'm thinking that might be the only bird they know. And
or like failure to fill out certain things. Like there was a lot of species absent from my data. whether they're putting in random points from birds at different locations, or having like recordings of the birds dying at the the buildings that were being monitored, but not during the actual like designated times. That'll obviously like pile up more points for a certain building than others.
Yeah, and also in my data, at one building I had 3 yellow-billed cuckoos that were all found on the same day at the same time. 3 of them in the same column.
By different people?
Yeah. So that means that the bird wasn't collected. They were all just passing by and saying, "Oh, I found one! I found another one," but they didn't know a single one. So that was like there's that to add.
Just like little errors that goes
And so further research, there's a lot of things we would want to do with this. The problem is that we didn't get our own data, so we were kind of stuck with the task of like filtering it and sorting it and making it the best that we could. So the most interesting thing to me would be the building heights to collision ratio. I think at least in Charlotte you would definitely see some trends there, because I mean I'm from Charlotte. I know that the Omni is a big, huge building, like big in girth and in height. And we were also talking about mapping the migratory pathways so you can analyze directionality. Maybe I can't quite figure out how the light turning off is actually working, but maybe it's better to turn on some lights and divert them in a different path if it's attracting them or disorienting them. The GPS points would be really, really, really helpful, so that you can see an exact distribution instead of just like coloring the entire building with like a quantity of birds that died there. Trends in gender or age. We didn't have gender and we didn't have age consistently in our spreadsheets. So even though that was something that we initially were like, oh, that would be interesting to look at, we weren't able to do that. And then having a full report of all the buildings in the area that are participating in the lights off, because it is a volunteer basis. You can't force people to turn their lights off. So there could be some buildings right behind or near the concentrated areas where we're seeing the most collisions happening. So there's a lot we could do with this. Do y'all have any questions? Wait, no, it's not the end of it. Animation. Oh yeah, your animation.
You can take questions while you set it up.
So during your research, do you think that it would be realistic to like establish a time of death for the bird, or would that just be too hard? Because I was thinking, like you could find out what times they're colliding, and maybe there's like mechanism.
They go out in the mornings. I know that it's supposed to be in the mornings to check for the birds.
Because the birds migrate at night, and like at the dawn during the season. So when the birds hit the buildings, they fall to the ground in the morning. Then the volunteers find them. So it's really.
But yeah, it's.
Then every volunteer.
You'd have to train the volunteers to be like morticians of birds, like probe them and figure out when they actually
And they
die.
all have like different kind of regimens. Volunteers, like some go out very methodically, and others
Right, and some will just be like, today looks like a good bird day.
Good day to look at that bird.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because there's a ton of citizen science around birds. Like,
Yeah.
people reporting on the see
That's the one that Jimmy was using. It's on the other side. Sorry, you were directing me towards that one, and I was like, no, I can't do that one. It's white. It's white. Yeah, it's gotta be. It's gotta be. It's good enough.
I'm way more
Oh my god. This is ArcScene. Everyone has access to it. Everyone also has access to ArcGlobe, which surprisingly, I did a lot of work in ArcGlobe before realizing I started to work with ArcScene, couldn't get it to then went back and did it in ArcScene because it's a little cleaner. So I can help you with both if you need help with it. And then this is also just kind of like extra fluff that I added to kind of give you guys perspective, because you can't add base layers in this. Like you can't do the streets like base map right like that. I also wanted to label things for you guys, but unfortunately my computer kept crashing when I went to do labels for the buildings. But if you want to do it, you just go to the 3D graphics toolbar and you can do it there. And so I'll just go through these. Like this is what it looks like kind of individually. So this is 2011 data, 2012 data, 2013, and 2014 data, and all together, it's like obviously very hard to make that comparison between them. It just doesn't represent it that well. And so I had animation kind of progressing through this, and I tried to keep some of the buildings transparent while it's changing, so you can still kind of make those comparisons like as it's going through the transition, because that's kind of, like I said, one of the biggest things that I struggled with through this project was how to kind of represent like the comparison between each year, like within one map. So, yeah.
Great. You guys did a great job. I think, the ArcScene thing, when your comment about doing, I want to see the city three-dimensionally, because that's what the birds are seeing.
Yeah.
That would be another way to incorporate some 3D component to it.
Yeah, and like especially for their cities, like that's I feel like it's a greater possibility just because I wasn't able to find a layer that like had the outlines of Winston-Salem buildings already in them, which was very frustrating. But it might be out there, and I just didn't find it, I guess. But yeah.
Do you want like username and password for the ArcGIS Online to like look at our maps?
That would be great. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll give that to you.
You said everything else right. Okay. Did they give you any? Colleen's doing some sampling for this. Did they give you any guidance about what you're supposed to do, or?
Well, I pretty much what I was talking about but wait, no, not yet. My schedule like that. Yeah. Very easy schedule. Like consistent. She said, "Were you impressed?" But pretty much what I'm doing is like I said tonight too. Is I go out and here, and then tomorrow morning I'll go out to see from what I collected for tonight. Like this week, I go tomorrow morning. We're there for while they're I mean, I've got it.
I didn't know.
Guys, do you know how to do on Thursday? I do. Skip several times.
I got more in the dark. I got time. I got really safety. Yeah, she's like gel forever.
So if I'm in here, do you know where like the line of the
When it's carried, it's spread. That was a spread.
Okay. Okay.
Want us to like email it to you so you don't have to take that tiny little piece of paper?
Probably more reliable for me personally. I have a lot of tiny pieces of paper. Okay, guys, we're gonna this will be the last one for today, and then we'll do our graduate student presentation on Thursday.
Okay, so we looked at the impacts that the Winston-Salem Northern Beltway has on
carbon storage and then biomass with the construction. So just a little background about the Winston-Salem Northern Beltway. The objective, the reason they wanted to build it in the first place, was that it could increase safety on popular travel routes by reducing the amount of congestion. So, this is where it starts on the western section, so that's US 158, and then that's where it ends on US 311. So in total, it's about 34.2 miles in length. It's not an approximation. And the western section and then the eastern section are kind of creating that loop in order to make sure that there's less congestion.
Okay, so environmental concerns of the NCDOT. The record of decision addresses the steps taken to avoid harm in several categories, including the environment. The effect of air quality was discussed, stating that construction of the Beltway will not exceed the National Ambient Air Quality Standard for carbon monoxide, and this is using the microscale modeling.
So other areas of concern that the record of decision addresses are wildlife, biotic communities, and protected species. And pretty much reading the record of decision, it stated that these communities would be affected, but because they were using the selected alternative to the route, because there were a lot of discussions about the route, that it would do the minimum amount of damage, and that included an impact on terrestrial biotic communities, but they really were focusing on wetland communities more so than anything else. And again, they were saying there's going to be some damage to it, but with the terrestrial biotic communities, what that decision was saying was that these areas wouldn't be paved over, and then through time they've returned back to grassy and ruderal vegetation. So I thought that was very interesting.
Maybe fine, they'll come back.
Like, oh yeah, they'll grow back sweet. That's great. Yeah.
Okay, for methods, we created a new feature class. We digitized all of the forested area. We had a rule that, say, a section of forest area had like a random house somewhere in there. We just, if it's less than 25%, we just added it because I don't know how to make a donut shaped. Anyways, so then we added all of our areas together, summed the area, and used those values in our calculations later. So I did the western section, and the green area, which is hard to see inside the red, is the above ground biomass, and the outline is in red of the western part of the North Beltway.
Then I did the eastern section, and again, we used the same methods in order to digitize those areas. So on my map, you have the red outline of that eastern section, and this is a total that came from the nice art online map. And then the green is the above ground biomass. And we didn't make the shape file because that's really complicated. The great part was that, and you got in contact with this guy, Kevin Edwards. He works for the Winston-Salem, I'm not sure what department, but he does GIS, and he had made shape files of the Beltway, so he gave them to Professor Dickson, and she gave them to us. So we got to use those, which was really nice as well. And then, like Aspen said, we made the feature class, made those digitized areas, and then we could go into the contribute tables and the areas. Which was really important because we wanted to find the impact that they had on carbon storage. So what we did was we looked at them separately with the eastern and western sections and then combined. So the area, the default was in feet, which was just how we set the projections in ArcMap. And so what we did was we opened the attribute table. You can't calculate geometry on the shaped area, which is the default that it sets. So you had to make an additional field within the attribute table. When you do that, you can then play around with the units. So at first it was in meters squared, but then we found better data to represent carbon storage, so we changed it to hectares. And that's reflected in this column. And then the carbon storage, we got the data from the forest inventory and analysis
above ground carbon storage for forests in the United States, and they use raster data from 2000, or they represented data from 2000 to 2009 and represented it through raster to show the carbon storage. And so for North Carolina, where we were looking at, it was a range of 20 to 40 megagrams per hectare, which is equivalent to a metric ton. And so what we did, just a simple conversion, 20 to 40, we use that range, which is why we have two numbers for each in that column. And those are our data for the carbon storage. We did a similar calculation for biomass. We again used raster, but we didn't use it from the forest inventory analysis. We instead used it from the Woodhull Research Group. They also had a map that had data from 2000 that combined U.S. Forest Service data and then also satellite imagery. And again, the total northern beltway, above ground forested sections, and then that which was remaining post deforestation, so post getting rid of the above ground forested sections. The biomass that map showed is 100 tons per hectare. And so for our data, you can see that, again, simple conversion, that's how much biomass is left. And then you can estimate the carbon emissions by, as Dickson told us, by subtracting the post-deforestation from that, the above-ground forested area. And I thought it would be interesting to look at how construction vehicles would also emit carbon, just because there's a lot of heavy equipment used to build a highway. I don't know a lot about construction, and there's not a lot of information about construction vehicles and how much CO2 they emit. This data I actually got from an extended abstract that a professor of environmental engineering at Oklahoma State University did in cooperating with some people at NC State. And I used a bulldozer because I was like, that's something that could tear down some trees. I'm not a construction person. So this kind of just gives this I would not ever present to someone. This is my own research to figure out a little bit. And the units were grams per horsepower hour and divided by the area. And so that was for the western, eastern, and then combined. That wasn't necessarily what we were looking at in our project, but that would be cool.
The discussion, potential errors, as I mentioned, the 0.9% or less rule. I think Colleen abided by it a little more than I did. If I saw trees, I was pretty interested in digitizing them. Also, the data used to calculate our values were estimates, and we have one with a pretty big range of 20 to 40. So further points of analysis, urban forest service carbon sinks, and carbon density of urban forest can be studied in relation to residential development. We'd have to convert the urban Charlotte area and use in order to use it
the values. So kind of going back to what we just talked about with the carbon numbers, is that there's a lot, and you always have to use estimates. There are a lot of different types of data out there. So at first we were using a number that was published in a paper about the Charlotte area, but then we found better ranges of the carbon storage. But I still thought that the discussion was important to include that information, even though we didn't use that number, because the paper pretty much concluded saying, yeah, this is a method that you can use in different cities, especially looking at urban forests. But every city is going to be different than Charlotte, so you can't just say that it's the exact method. You have to calibrate it to be specific for the city that you're looking at.
We also looked into the influence of trees in an urban environment and their effect on carbon emissions, altering the microclimate of the city with any trees as a result of transformational cooling. And this influence on microclimate must be considered when assessing the amount of carbon cities emit and the effect of trees on this type of climate change.
If it's cooler, less air conditioning.
This.
Okay.
Yeah. Is grams per horsepower hour per hectare? Is that per? How many bulldozers on a hectare?
See, this is why like, I would not ever use this as like a scientific argument, being like, this is what you did with the bulldozers, because.
Is that a hectare of bulldozers?
You need to make an assumption about how many hours it takes to clear a hectare.
I guess it is true. I didn't think of that.
Yeah, you're missing one unit of conversion there.
Okay. So.
That would make it. Okay, yeah, that'd be clear.
Thankfully, this wasn't the main
Yeah.
kind of conversion that we were doing, but with this was that. So what he was looking at was, the professor who did this, was he was looking at different types of machinery, and so I think he had 6 bulldozers that he got this average number from, and then that 258 grams per horsepower hour, that was what I was looking at. And I'm not a construction person, and I don't know how many hours it takes to clear a hectare. I think it was just a really. It could
It's a hard number to get to.
Right.
It totally depends on what you're doing.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think it just kind of shows that it's a good starting point where it's like, okay, this is where you could start, then you can take it further. Does that make sense?
You need to work on your units, right, so you can combine them to have a
Would it
total
make
emissions.
more sense if you didn't include the per hectare?
Well, that was
I guess that's the whole point of reference.
right, because that per hectare for the carbon emission from the construction vehicle using that idle and non-idle combined was for that section, the total area
Right.
of above ground biomass. Again, I'm not a construction person. I'm
Yeah,
use
no,
this
no,
as a bunch of argument.
I
More
just-
important was the carbon storage of biomass.
Yeah,
This was
yeah.
just kind of a little extra.
So, Allison, you did the western portion. Do you think that you're being more lenient on the rural is why we have a difference in the?
It's possible. I also had a huge stand like just for us.
Okay.
With no road just cutting through or anything, so that could contribute to that.
Alright. So your biggest challenge of this project was?
Saving the polygons.
Base map.
Base map.
It was like working really nice, but there was one section I was like, come on, Arcap, you got this.
That's always
I even
hard
went
to
to the bridge and I was like, and that's like a really big deal for me. Like I convinced myself I have to go to the bridge. And I was like, I don't know if you know anything about ArcGIS. The guys like, I don't. And I'm like, well, this is great. We thought it was cool though, our project. But base map.
Okay, good job, guys. That's great. So for you guys too, I need your shape files so I can look at them.
Oh.
Your digitized files.
Okay.
And for you guys, we have to figure out how to present your data to the Audubon.
Definitely need to send us an email or whose email you forwarded to us.
Yeah, I think I might set up a time when she'll come and you guys can go through it.
Yeah.
And then maybe figure out a way that, I don't know if you want to continue working on it, you could figure out how it would be more useful to them.